Okay, so welcome everyone. Thanks so much for coming. And I don't really even know what to say about Joanne. I know a lot of you have listened to her podcasts. Now you get to spend some time with her. So I think of all the teachers that I've studied with, Joanne's had the most profound effect on the way that I've moved and how I've approached my practice. And so I hope that this session today and the one that we do on Friday will also inspire you as much. And please bring questions, and you'll see Joanne is just a wealth of knowledge. So really, like, take the opportunity to get with the information that you need and to ask the questions that you need answered. So Joanne, I don't know if you want to share anything else about yourself, or if we should just jump in because time is limited, but I'm happy either way.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Michelle. And I want to ask you this before we get started. There's part of me, I've gone very carefully through the postures you sent me to look at them as from a posture clinic point of view. And if I'm really honest, I'm like, I want to shift the fundamental understanding a little bit before we even start. So I'm now caught with, is this the time to introduce the fundamentals and then look at the postures differently, and maybe consider what we're doing the other way around? Because what I want to do is give everybody these fundamental laws of the physics of human bodies, not all complicated, I promise, but very clear from our experience. And my intention is that some of you, most of you, and probably all of you, rather than sitting there going, oh my God, how am I going to remember this? How am I going to learn this? How am I ever going to know this? Are going to go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then you'll receive a different response to those postures. So I was going to go through them, and then rather than analyze each one deeply in a discussion, because we'll end up going, if we've got 20 postures, we'll end up going down 20 rabbit holes. What I want to do is embed the whole kind of foundation for you. And then perhaps with the next one, we can bring individual questions much more to life if you have them. I don't want everyone to feel that we've run out of time in a linear sense, that we got, a third of the way through something huge. And that's all we can do, really. But what I do want to do is get you so that rather than just walking amongst trees, you've got an understanding that this is an orchard, that this is a fruit orchard, which fruits are growing where, and some of the logic behind why we grow peaches on that side and raspberries on that side, and down the middle is all cherries because of the way the ground works. So that, do you see what I'm saying? I just want to identify it, and I don't want to go deep on each tree. But I want you all to have a grounding, and just stick up a thumb if everybody's okay with that. Yeah, great. Oh God, look at this. I'm sorry about this. It does all sorts of things. Yesterday, I made an announcement in a presentation, and there were stars and lights all around me, and the timing of it was just impeccable. I haven't got a clue what hand gesture I made to make it happen. And Paul Thornley was just in hysterics. Is that what I did for fireworks? That's Tamlin's telling me. But see, look, if I do it now, it doesn't do anything. And then I said to everybody, we've got to do this. And I did that. And then I got confetti everywhere. I know how to do that. So let's just say lots of love to every single one of you. I want you all to know that we start off our lives as heart-centered embryos. It's the third book that's coming. And we all start heart-centered. The heart begins the syncopation of our growth. And I'm just going to go for it and see what we get. And we may get to the postures or not, but I'm going to share them with you. So I'm going to undo your spotlight, Michelle, with all my love. And if any of you have got questions, stick them in the chat so you don't forget them. I'll pick up on what I can as I go, but generally speaking, I'm going to keep going because this is going to be a lot of information for you to disseminate. But I'm hoping it's rather kind of like, oh my God, that's me, than, oh, how am I going to remember that and that and that? I hope it's going to be more of a sensory shift than a mental thing. And I'm just going to explain one thing so that you all feel a bit more at ease. And can everybody see my whiteboard behind me if I pull this forward and do that? Yeah, can I have a thumbs up? Yeah, you can see that. Great. So this is the side I'm working on here. What I just want to make really, really clear is I am not slagging off, criticizing, or degrading any practice that anyone does. So I teach yoga. Obviously, I'm a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist. I have a yoga teacher training school that I'm not running at the moment. So I'm supporting and mentoring yoga teachers that are working with their yoga teacher training. So Michelle is just, you know, such a precious individual, because she came to me with so many questions, and literally it was I have this picture in my head, Michelle, of a nest of birds with all their beaks open, and you can't feed them all fast enough, and you've been just like, yeah, more, and it's been incredible. But how I want to set the stage for this is that basically everything we inherited in terms of knowledge about the human body was set inside a metaphor and a context that no longer applies. Now, what I've just said is great big huge. And it's like hundreds of years ago, a man called Galileo stated aloud and publicly and published papers on the fact, such as it was in the 17 and 1800s or 1700s. He upheld Copernicus' theory that the earth is round. Now, just like, what's she talking about? The earth is round. I mean, what's that got to do with everything? Anything. It's got to do with everything. Here's why. Up until that time, the belief was that the earth was flat because that's our local perception. And it was heresy to consider anything other than a flat earth at the center of the galaxy, meaning a geocentric. Put this over here. Can you see this? No, you can't. It's too pale. Oh, damn it. I don't know if I've got a strong enough marker. Can you see it? You can see on this one, can't you? Geo means earth. So as far as, and religion was very, very important in the Western world. So as far as the Pope was concerned, human beings were the sacred man. Hu means sacred or divine. It actually means divine in Sanskrit. So human meant divine man. So human lived on flat, in, we all know that, earth, at the geocentric universe, i.e. center of the universe, which is a real compliment and recognition of the sacred nature of being human. So, and we all are that. Now, the Roman Catholic Church was in charge of that. So when Galileo upheld Copernicus' theory and said, hang on a minute, the reason why we can't work out the astrological movement of the planets in relation to the Earth is because amongst the celestial bodies, the sun is actually at the center. We're a heliocentric universe, galaxy, and we are just one of the planets. And that was considered heresy. But because he'd gone to school with the then Pope and was friends with him, and he was in Italy, Galileo wasn't tried and hung for treason. He was put under house arrest. But this is a huge shift from a flat Earth to a round Earth, and Earth as one of many planets around a sun, light-centered, and the sun was the heart of our universe. That was heresy in the day. Now, here's the thing. What happened in human anatomy and physiology carried on under the laws of the Roman Catholic Church. Because René Descartes went to the Pope to get permission. And in fact, he didn't even publish the papers at the end of his life because he saw what happened to Galileo and he thought, I don't want to be put under house arrest. So I'm going to go to the Pope and get permission to dissect human bodies, because up until that time, dissection was done on Barbary apes because they were like human bodies. They're nothing like the human spine at all. I mean, it's a spine, they're vertebrates, but hello, totally different animal. Even though some people walk around and sit like Barbary apes, that doesn't mean our spine is optimized in that position. And I have to tell you, some yoga postures optimize apes over beings because something got lost in translation along the way. And we'll talk about that. And we'll see if we can put it into practice. So will you make a note of that for me, Michelle? It's a very simple practice that I want to share with you. And it becomes fundamental to every single one of the postures you sent me. But let's just stay with Galileo for the minute. Descartes knew what was going on and didn't publish all his papers and findings, and he's considered to be the father of modern science. But he went to the Pope to get proper sanction to dissect human bodies, to study human motion, and validate the theories that they had at the time. This is late 1700s now. And in order to get that permission, the Pope granted it under a particular deal. And Candace Pert, in her book Molecules of Emotion, in the introduction, writes about this turf deal with the Pope. And basically the turf deal was this, and this is what the way we're going to go forward with all this study. The turf deal was, you can have the body, but the being, the mind, the spirit, the soul, the invisible metaphysical aspect of that body stays under the jurisdiction and the sanction of the church, because it's the church's job to sanctify, to choose whether that soul goes to purgatory, hell, or heaven, and to honor the way that soul lived its life and be its spiritual guide and master. That was the role of the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, still is, I believe. Now, this is not a religious comment. I've got nothing to say about it. But what I can tell you is that that rift was drawn between the body and the being, the physical and the metaphysical. Now, the word psyche means soul. So the psychology went under the jurisdiction of the church and evolved under the heading of psychology. And the physiology came under the jurisdiction of the science of medicine and stayed there. But the being animating the body had a rift cut through it, and it was the biggest case of divide and conquer in human history, in my opinion. Now what we know is that the being animating this body, and in my world, and I have a doctorate in spiritual science, so I feel like I've got a little bit of a qualification to say this, we're 90% spirit and 10% animating a physical body through which to express it. And what I can tell you from my studies with world-leading embryologists, and I mean one-to-one in the lab and hours in their classrooms, and working with them and having them help me write my books and oversee them and send the words out and phone me up and say, you can't say that, but you can say this. Working really closely with them is that we self-organize. We are not at any point in our lives put through, our mothers do not go into hospital to have a limb bolt on procedure or a sensory infiltration system. We do not have our eyes inserted or our plumbing plumbed and our wiring wired. It's just that we use these metaphors to understand the physical body as if it was either a house, a solid hard matter architecture, or a machine. So we put the word bio in front of mechanics to explain the biomechanics of movement. And we used architecture as the metaphor for the physical body. Now, you're going to be able to read all about this in detail in my new book that's coming out in November, but I'm giving it to you so that you get it on the inside. Because according to René Descartes, the human body moved, and I quote, like any other automaton. Now, when we hear the word automaton, we hear automaton, automatic. But think about it. We have an autoimmune system. We have an autonomic nervous system. What does this word auto mean? Well, autos is Latin for self. So something got lost in translation. Let me bring this forward because I think it's too far away for me to actually see. Is that better? Yeah, of course it is. Autos, self, meant self-motivated, self-moving. And that was like, because he was an horologist, meaning he studied clocks. And what, if you think about it, if you wind up a clock, you don't stand there and move the pendulum or turn the handles around the face of the clock. Oh, for God's sake. Here, I'll sit here. You don't move the handles and turn the clock. It moves itself once it's wound up. So that was the theory on which we were thought to move. And over the 400 years since kind of anatomy became a thing, the psychology was studied over there, the physiology was studied over there, and through the Industrial Revolution, we learned this metaphor of mechanics. And as you probably all know, and if you're anything like me, you've had a hard time remembering or understanding or even making sense of it, we are considered to be a system of levers. So this is a lever, this is a lever, this is a lever, this is a lever, and so on. The problem with that, and it's great big huge, is there are no levers in nonlinear biologic forms, ever. No flora, no fauna, no animal, vegetable, or mineral has a lever in it. Bit of a problem. How do we explain movement in terms of levers and right angles when we're not building houses? Now think about this. When you're going to build a house, you have to make the land great. And there's a good metaphor. You have to make the soil right, the right level. You have to go out and buy the parts. What do? Well, basically sand is the biggest component. It's mixed in one way to form brick. It's mixed in another way with other ingredients to form cement. And it's treated in a different way with heat to form glass. So you make a frame out of one material, you build the bricks out of another material, depends how the house is built, obviously, but I'm using it as a metaphor, and you construct the architecture of the house, hopefully at right angles to the ground, because if it tilts more than a few degrees off center, or it can't respond to ground forces, such as earthquakes, it's going to crumble. Its structural integrity is going to go out the window. And that's the metaphor on which we base human structure. And there's a huge problem there. We took the wrong bit as a metaphor. The metaphor we need is the one fabric, i.e. the sand, that can do almost everything in the body, in the building. When it's treated differently and mixed differently, it has different qualities. But here's the thing. When you're going to build a house, you go out and buy the parts. So if any of you have been on a building site or watched a program about somebody like Grand Designs watching somebody build a house, what you've seen is all the component parts are acquired. So they have a load of bricks and they have a load of cement mixing and they have a load of flooring and a load of plaster to do the walls and they have wiring to do the wiring and tubes to do the piping. And why am I sharing all this? Because we accumulate the parts in order to distribute them and put them together in such a way that the accommodation is something we want to live in. And that's how we assume the human body works. We work out the parts, we define them, we apply a metaphor of mechanics to how they move, and we call it the locomotor system, the nervous system, meaning the wiring, the plumbing system, or the fluid system, meaning the plumbing, and then we get ourselves in a total pickle because they completely interrelate everywhere. And the equivalent of sand in the house that can be treated in certain ways and given certain ingredients added to it is actually a metaphor for fascia. But there's one great big huge problem. It's great big huge. In fact, there's two. The first great big huge problem is we're not made of hard matter. It's the wrong physics. So for 400 years, we've unwittingly been talking about the human body as if it's made of hard matter. As a lever is an open two-bar chain with a pin joint in the middle. Nothing in your body's open. Open two-bar chain, that's open, but the other end is not. And the definition of a lever as an open two-bar chain, I have one here, I have a lovely model, would mean it was open at both ends. It just isn't. It's literally the wrong metaphor. It's not open. This is not open, it's closed here. This is not open, it's closed here. This is not open, it's closed here. We are a closed chain mechanism if we're a mechanism. So already we've got the wrong metaphor. The other reason it's the wrong metaphor, this is a pin. And in fact, the word joint in the human body is short for pin joint. When your mother had you, she did not go into hospital and have your limbs bolted on with pins. So there are no pin joints in the body. There are no joints in the body. The entire body is a relentless continuum from ground to crown, from fingertips to fingertips, from heart to head, heart, hara, heels, all the way through. We are one continuum of tubes, pockets, and pouches, much like the earth in the round. So that's the first thing. We're not made of hard matter. We are absolutely not made of levers. And the other problem with using architecture as a metaphor is that we are not made of hard matter. So we're not machines. We're not made of hard matter. And we don't function at right angles. And we are not made of parts that are put together. You'd think somebody kind of worked this out, right? What does it take some nutty woman in Brighton to make this conclusion? Absolutely not. This is what I concluded from my absolute frustration of not being able to translate the yoga postures that I was taught 30 years ago for everybody that came in the room. And I started off with these shapes and saying to people, no, wait, you've got to put your heels down. This is dog pose. No, you've got to get your knees back. This is dog pose. And some people had hyperextended knees, and some people couldn't get their heels on the ground if they prayed. And some people, the more they did dog pose, the more they were coming to me as a manual therapist for repair to their shoulder. And I was working with Ashtanga teachers and Vinyasa flow teachers. And this thing that I started to see over time called Chaturanga shoulder. And then I started to see people having hip replacements. And I was like, holy Moses, what is going on? What are we doing that is causing such problems? And when I learned through learning about tensegrity architectures, which I'm going to take you to in a minute, is that there are no levers in nonlinear biologic forms. And when I heard the word nonlinear, my world collapsed. Because if the earth is flat, it's linear and we just walk. But what we know is that it isn't flat. We know it's round. Yet we can still walk without falling off. And do we know whether we're that way up at the moment or if we're hanging off upside down? And gravity is a weak force, not a strong one. So how do we correlate what the science understands, how we can build satellite navigation with what we think the human body does? And we can't correlate them while we're using machines as a metaphor, and we're judging postures in yoga in their linear organization because the body's not designed to be linear. And it gets worse than that. The body's not designed to be separate from the being unless it's dead. The body is animated by the being into form in the round. And here's the great big huge key for all of this. Never forget this as long as you live. You self-organize as a whole into parts. You do not go out and collect the ingredients and put the parts together. Neither does your mother. And as hard as it is for our society to accept that only women can carry, nurture, and give birth, sorry guys, it's just not the same. Equally respectful, equally entitled to respect, but not equal. No one's equal to anyone unless you live by the idea that every single one of us is exactly the same because every single one of us is unique. That you can have. We are all equally unique. And that's supposed to be a bit of a mind blower because until and unless we accept that, we are never going to find a way of putting ourselves all through the eye of the same needle. because you self-organized into form and you organized your own parts. And you did not do them in a flat plane with vertical options. You did them in the round with 361 degrees of possibility at all times. And even the parts of you are not on their own as the parts of you. There's the parts of you, they are held together by the scaffolding of you. And then there's something called the in-between of you. And all those things have names: cells, connective tissue, interstitium. Oh God, here we go. It just has moments. I swear to God, Paul reckons it's connected to my spirit. And when I say certain things, it makes me do a gesture that makes that happen. God knows. Here's that, but this is really important. You began as a unicellular being. You didn't begin as a single-celled option that had to accumulate a load of other cells. And that's not how you did it. What you did was you self-organized from the amniotic sac, touching the yolk sac, and they came together and formed what's called a bilaminar disc. But that was the touching point of two balls. So I've got two balls here. What I want you to imagine is that the amnios touched the yolk, and the base of the amnios and the top of the yolk became you. They were held together by two membranes, two little tubes that held them in place. And then the most unbelievable bioorganic origami took place, and we'll go into that another time. Inside here, these two so-called layers created an in-between, a third layer. They're not layers, they're not even derms, they're organic, growing, amazing things. And they reorganized and stayed. This grew and grew and grew and wrapped around itself and incorporated the gut until you became the full embryo within 8 weeks. And what syncopated that was something here. The heart. And the heart drew the brain. And the brain dropped its cells into the gut to form the gut. And then the brain pushed the heart down to the position it was going to take up when this bioorganic origami process was complete. And when it got to that place, the heart then designed the spine from the front. And everything wrapped around it and incorporated it. Corpus is body, brought it into the body. And we go into that in detail another time. But what I want you to understand is that you self-organized with the placenta around you, bringing in each function as you were ready to do the parts, but you to incorporate the parts, to form the parts, but to get the functions into those parts, you use this fabulous repository called the placenta, which is part of the whole dynamic. And then at the end, those two membranes ruptured, and one became the mouth and one became the anus. So you are basically a donut with a long wiggly tube down the middle and everything around you outside, always in the round. Tubes within tubes, within tubes, within tubes, within pockets, within pouches, all made of fascia and all comprised of three things: cells, connective tissue, and the in-between. And the in-between is full of something called ground substance. Its name is ground substance. It's our inner earth. And it matters. And when we force ourselves into linear positions, we stop the natural flow of the fluid currents running through that earth. Now, it's not solid earth, it's liquid. It's a liquid crystal matrix. Fascia is a liquid crystal. We are contained up to 70–80% of bound water. Not ordinary liquid water, bound water. Some of you have probably come across Gerald Polak's work on bound water. It means more organized than free water. Now, tree surgeons know all about bound and free water. It's nothing new to them. And do you think it's a coincidence that we inhale what trees exhale and we exhale what trees inhale? and that trees are very like us. They are just at one end of the stability to mobility scale, and we are at the other. They are bound into the earth, and we are bound to move over it. But we still organize ourselves using the same gravitational rooting possibilities. Trees have a heart, trees have a crown, trees have branches, which is brachii in Latin, and guess what we call our muscles are named after the tree, brachialis, biceps brachialis, triceps brachialis. So we are incorporated in a very similar way, but the tree has mastered stillness at a level that we dream of. And we have mastered motion at a level maybe they dream of. And in between are all the other animals and fauna and flora. Every single one is non-linear. Every single one is animated by life force, unlike houses, unlike cars. And every single one of them has not a lever anywhere or a pin joint anywhere. They're just made of different textures of fascia, basically. So I like to call it a living architecture. Nice new word for you all to play with. Now that living architecture is animated by your beingness. So as a human, divine man, you have a sacred beingness that animates your human body. That is the spirit of you, 90%, that animates your psyche through your body, your psychosomatic form. So when somebody accuses you of having an emotion and a problem and says, oh, it's all psychosomatic, as if that can dismiss it, what else is there? We are a walking psychosomatic organization, and we are born with an energy saving capacity called elasticity. And it only works in the round. Because every time we push something round like this ball, it pushes back. When we pull it, it pulls back. When we try to twist it, it does something called resisting deformation. It's designed that way. Otherwise, the weight of the water would crush the whale and the clownfish. The power of the air in a high wind would kill a bird. And the force of gravity would collapse us if it went up one micro dot. It's all just right. We are all already living in the Goldilocks zone. That's how we're able to move and manage air and modify our movement to move through water and modify our movement again to climb the side of a mountain. Human beings are incredible. But the architecture of the human body is a system of architectures that must allow that fluid matrix of bound water within it to move. Now that liquid crystal matrix, now the only liquid in your body is urine. It's the only liquid. It's the output of everything else going through you. And of course, the liquid that you put in your mouth to drink. Everything else is bound on degrees of gel-like density. The hardest of the soft matter in you is bone. It's highly crystallized, and it has something in it called hydroxyapatite. But only the outside part is crystallized like that. Inside a bone, it's more like porridge, because that's where baby blood cells are made. Inside the bone, we call it bone marrow, right? The softest soft matter of you is actually the superficial fascia. So if you take your skin on the back of your hand with your fingertips and just try and glide that skin over the back of your hand, it moves really easily. It's really soft and gooey. It's like egg white. It's bound. And if you try and do the same on the palm of your hand, can you feel it's a very different texture to the back of your hand? Now, I've got a glass of water here, so I'm not going to do that because it's full. But I can hold this glass of water with my hands this way, drink from it, which is already a very advanced modification. You know, when you get a newborn child or a young, let's put like 6-8 months in a you know, a high chair, we call them, and you give it a glass of water, you absolutely know it's going to end up wearing the water, or you're going to find it all over the kitchen or wherever you are, right? Because they haven't got the subtle coordination to pick this up, to know exactly how much power to use to drink from it. Having removed some of the water, you then adjust the power completely instinctively to put it back because it now weighs differently. Now, if you try doing that with the backs of your hands, I don't know that I can even with this, not without using my thumbs. There we go. It's just not a very efficient way of working. I'm sure I could do it because I've got hypermobile hands, but it's not ideal. Now, what that means is that you already have the architecture that you need through use. And that's how we learn to move. We're born moving. The fact that we're moving means we're alive. And we're born without a full pelvis. What we have is a ring of potential yet to become bone. Now, the human pelvis isn't fully formed as a ring of the bones called the innominates until we're about 5 or 6 years old, and we've been running around enough to put the forces through the system sufficient to organize it so that it works out where its fulcrums are and where its organization is optimized. But in that process, we gather the ability to bounce, or we're born with the ability to bounce simply because everything in us is round. And this is called a tensegrity structure. Now, if we use a model, and I'm sure some of you have come across these models, this is a tension compression model of a structure. Now, the model we're all taught by is this, as if the bones in the spine are stacked, but this needs a stick up its tail to hold any shape at all. And we haven't got to stick up our tail. We're self-organizing. This is wrong. This is a picture of an X-ray, not a human body. Because what's missing from this is the tissue that holds it together. This is just the end result of how that tissue holds. And if you saw it on an X-ray, you would see what look like spaces in between these bones, when in fact they are discs. They are organized in a very, very specific way. And I want to show you how they're organized. So we've got to get from 2D architecture to 3D function. Don't expect to remember any of this. Just roll with me. I just want your minds blown, because in order to get this, you've got to get out of your minds. This column that I set up here, the first level is intellectual. This is the intellect. And this is the realm of data and information. And this is where our science lives. This is where the doctor that comes in, and you go to see the doctor, and the doctor's looking at the screen, and he's looking at the x-rays, and he's looking at the scans, and he's looking at the data, and he puts your finger in a pulse ox meter, and he puts a blood pressure thing around your arm, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I walk in with a damn nearly broken leg from a skiing accident with a plaster, you know, one of those leg braces from thigh to foot. And I limp in and I sit down, and he looks at the computer and he says, is that Joanne Avison? And I say, yes, doctor. And he says, which leg is it? Excuse me? Which leg is it? Looks at me like slightly annoyed. Just tell me which leg you've injured. And I'm a bit of a cowbag. And I looked at him and I said, if I did that to one of my clients, I'd be struck off. At least I hope I would. Not that there's many people to police it, but really? He looked at me, he was furious, looked me straight in the eye, and he said, I just asked you which leg it was. And I looked him straight back in the eye and I said, and I'm asking you to work it out. I'm asking you to look at me. I'm a human being, not a data list. on your computer. Your computer can't analyze what's wrong with me. It's much worse now. I have clients coming to me with injuries and they've had x-rays and they've been told something's not broken. It's so broken, it's ridiculous. You can practically see it, let alone feel it, because they've had to put their foot into something a bit like a photo booth for a passport photo. And it's called a virtual doctor or a virtual x-ray. And the photograph has been sent to someone who's just looked at the picture and said, there's nothing wrong with you, go away. And I've known instances of them having their notes crossed in the ether. Now, I'm not saying that's what happens generally. It may be rare, but it's something I've seen in my practice. And I'm horrified because sometimes our movement work really is part of the field of healing arts. Now, whether you're a chiropractor, an osteopath, Tai Chi master, a yoga teacher, a Pilates teacher, a gyrotonic teacher, a physiotherapist, a osteopath, whatever, whoever you are in the healing arts. And the question is, what medium do you love working with? How do you express your genius the best is where I live. Now, you might prefer gouache to acrylic. You might prefer oil paint to watercolor. You might prefer pencil to pastel, whatever that is for you. But one of the reasons we are so needed is because we communicate heart to heart and we're listening and watching as a being with a being, which means we join them in their resonance field. We do not hide in here. And this is the realm of biomechanics. This is the realm of statistics. And this is the realm of metrics that are completely quantity-based. In other words, we measure it on a basis of numbers in what we call secular numerics. 1 + 1 is 2. And in my world, 1 and 1 is 11. Now, what world is my world? This is the intellectual realm. This is the instinctive realm. And this is instinctive movement. This is history. This is now. Because we can only breathe and move in the present moment. Right now, feel your tailbone, feel your sitting bones. I hope you're not sitting on your tailbone. I hope you're up on your sitting bones. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I want you to understand that in present time, you can only be in your instinctive movement center. Anything you've done before is historical. It's in your history. Everything you're doing now is current. It's now, and it's gone. Now, it's gone. Now, it's gone. Now is the ever-present moment. This is everlasting. This is eternity. We literally can't stand it because we have to let go of what's just happened so immediately. This is a place of huge forgiveness. This is us now in our instinctive movement center. Because if we weren't in our instinctive movement center, we'd be completely immobilized, and being completely immobilized, like not even breathing, is dead. And every cell in us is breathing. Every tissue in us is holding those cells together in communication with them. And the skin of us surrounding us has an energy field. We call it the aura or the plasma or the etheric body or whatever you want to call it. It's got very specific names, but it gives us access to higher and higher frequencies of resonance because we are not made of separate parts. We are made up of joined up tension compression architecture, which means we resonate. Now, can you see the tiniest tremor moves through this entire model because it dissipates force through the whole system. And this whole system was made of different textures, architecture, not of flat planes, but of 3D round things There, it becomes 3D. And in fact, we self-organize through something called invagination. We folded through ourselves, which takes us to 4D. Can you see that's a tube made of a tube? And that is in fact a model of a spinal disc. And if you take that and twist it again, you have a model. It forms a cup at the top and the base. You have a model of the cruciate ligament in the knee. It's like an egg cup and an egg cup underneath, because it's a tube made of a tube made of a tube, that inside of it, when you spiral it, forms a very strong spring-loaded cushion for the upper leg bone and the lower leg bones to integrate on each other. And that's the pattern of ligaments throughout the body. They're actually holding bones apart while the myofascia, the muscles, are pulling them together. And that push me, pull me is what gives us the ability to bounce. It's our innate ability. I'm bouncing this off my leg. It's our innate ability to spring. Anything we do in yoga that stops or stultifies or stagnates that spring is detrimental in the long term. Anything. Yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, martial arts, dance, whatever. It is detrimental in the long term. Now, Paul, my colleague, works with the Dubai, like the equivalent of the Royal Ballet in Dubai, and he has half the class of 11 to 15-year-olds. And he teaches them how to preserve that spring loading in every single so-called joint. I'm going to give you another word for joints. So we've got architecture that we're going to think about as architecture, because that allows us for the different textures in the body. And we've got another word for joints. I believe the word joint, pin joint, came from Borelli, who dissected a dog's leg. So he cut the leg off the dog's body and it formed an open 2-bar chain because it was open at both ends, because it had been removed from the body that it belonged to. You grew your limbs out of the tube of your torso. They are not part of an open chain system. They are not part of, there's no 2-bar open chains. Everything in the body is in a continuum. They are spring loaded. And his book was published after he died, and it was called De Motu Animalium, the movement of animals. And that title was copied from Aristotle. And Aristotle was one of the great Greek philosophers, and he wrote a book called De Motu Animalium, but it included the nature of the animal. It included the awareness. It included the soul, which was written out of the story by the time Borelli's book was published. And Aristotle called joints, and write this down in great big letters, resting points. And think about it. When we sit down, we rest on the base of the pelvis. When we lean on our elbows, we rest here, or we rest our wrists. I rest my chin on my hands. We lie on our beds and we fold our arms because they're resting points. We look at the so-called joints in the neck. They are a continuous tube. Can we make sure when we lie down that we have something that stops us scrunching these tubes in different ways? When we do cat-cow, we tend to put our hands immediately under our shoulders and sometimes lock our elbows. Now, some people I work with say, oh, we never let anybody lock their elbows. And other people say, oh no, my God, we have to lock the elbows and place the hands immediately under the shoulders. That's not how your shoulder girdle works. Your shoulder girdle works, and I think in the next class, Michelle, make a note of this, darling. What we're going to do is show some specific postural ways of being on the hands and on the shoulders. I want to give you the background about it. I want to blow your mind, so you're all thinking for the week in between about, well, now how do I do this? I want you to go out and be willing to enter the third state with me. You're not going to like it, okay? Just telling you. History, present, mystery. And if you're not willing to enter the realm of mystery and you're not willing to not know, you're never going to learn anything. I've been studying spiritual science in the realm of Surat Shabda Yoga for the last 10 years. And the hardest lesson I had to learn was the willingness to not know. You know, when you've got Reverend Doctor in front of your name, you sound like someone who thinks they know what's going on. And the bigger the qualification, the more I know that this is where I live, in the mystical world of clueless. I'm like, seriously? What? I don't know. People come to me saying, my shoulder hurts. Can you help me? Probably, but I don't know. What do you mean? I thought you were a doctor of spiritual science and a structural integrator. Yeah, but I don't know what you did. I don't know if you were run over by a bus or if you've been sleeping awkwardly. If you were run over by a bus, you need a surgeon. And if you were sleeping awkwardly, maybe I can help you. My answer to everybody is, I don't know, but let's see. Why do I say that? It's not to protect myself, although it kind of is. Why do I say that? It's because I know that I don't know. I know that I don't know. This is a safe realm. So we live in, you see this, we live in a Mobius loop. It's a figure of 8. And this is the history. This is the realm where we say things like, I know. This is where we actually live, in this center point, which is the present moment. And the answer there is always, it depends. And this is the realm of mystery. And it's always, I don't know. Because otherwise it wouldn't be a mystery. I want you to feel really safe here. You're in good hands, I promise. Basically, because it's not me that's working this, it's spirit. It's literally coming through me and coming out my mouth. You don't have to believe that, but please don't imagine that I'm smart enough to put this all together on my own. Really? Now, in this mystery realm, where we don't know what's going on, we're working in our intuition. And we find out in the moment what we could have, should have, would have said if only we'd known that then. Put your hand up if that's the story of your life at one level or another. If only I'd done that, or if only I'd known that, then I should have, would have, could have done, if only I'd. Welcome to being human. This is Earth School. And your soul made a sacred contract with whatever you believe in, heaven, God, spirit, grace, nature, whatever you want to call it, source, to come into Earth School and have the experiences in motion of presence. And this is a negative realm. Mostly we live in a negative realm. Physical, astral, causal, mental, and etheric are negative realms. What do I mean by that? I mean the physical body, I mean the imagination, I mean the emotional body, the mental body, the subconscious and the unconscious are all charged like a battery negatively. Soul is positive. And soul lives here. And when soul penetrates all the other stuff, we get intuition. And how do we say it? We say, oh, I got this hit. Oh my God, you came into my mind. I can't believe you texted me. You were in my mind this morning. Oh my God, did you hear me thinking about you? In that realm, you see somebody that you haven't seen for 10 years, and you're walking down a train platform or a street, and they walk towards you and you know who it is before you see them. Why? Because every single one of us has a movement signature that we don't even know, we don't know what it is. But something in us does. Something in us reads that movement signature. When I took my son to La Gomera when he was 7, La Gomera is an island off the coast of Spain, and we went dolphin and whale watching. And we spent 5 weeks. He went completely feral, him and his friends. They just were like wild children. And we went out on the boats looking for dolphins, and he had a way, we don't know what it was, but the boatmen just loved it. They would say, oh no, come on our boat, because somehow or other, my son managed to call the dolphins. And because we saw so many, and we saw so many different species, we got quite friendly with one particular boatman that really looked after us. And he said, you have to learn to read their tail prints in the water. Excuse me? Their tail prints in the water. So the whales and the dolphins, you know, they're huge tail flukes. They move the water in a certain way that makes rings on the surface, and those boatmen know the pattern of that water. And then you can read the species from a distance as a silhouette through its movement pattern. So the spinner dolphins have a very different sweep through the water than the bottlenose dolphins that have these long, low arcs. And the whales you read by their tail prints. Every single person you ever meet has a movement signature. And the truth of the matter is, if you let go of all this and live here in your movement practice, two things will come available to you. One is this intuitive hit that I want you to become very reliant on. I want you to trust it. See, like whatever. And it's perfect timing always. And here, I'm not saying just run on your intuition and do what the hell you feel like. There's good movement and poor movement. But we have a very clear system to keep us in the realm of good movement in present time. I've got to tell you, there is a pair of magpies immediately outside my window, like they're not 2 feet away from me. And they're having a whole thing about building a nest. And they're running up and down the windowsill. It's so funny. They've been doing it for 2 days. And they're obviously busy, you know. Anyhow, this is where animals, trees, flora and fauna live. And this is where we tend to live. Am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right shapes in yoga? Am I doing the right blah, 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 blah? Probably not. In this realm, we honor the roundness of the form in every single way. Every single way. And what we do when we're present to the breath, that's all you have to do. When you're present to the breath, is you naturally honor the formation of your form. And the formation of your form is spiral. There are no straight lines. There are no symmetries. There are no flat planes. There are no organized angles in the human body. Anywhere, ever. And there's absolutely no mechanics, unless you've had a replacement so-called joint. And even then, we've got to incorporate it into the rest of the roundness, or you're in trouble. And we have to do that because we have to accept things the way they are in this realm. And that's the first law of spirit, by the way, acceptance. So just accepting that you already are amazing gives you access to this mysterious intuitive process. Now, there's another piece of information you need before I race through this slideshow for you. And what I will do is, if we go over, Michelle, it's not a problem to me, but I totally understand if anybody else needs to leave and they can see the last part on the recording, if that's all okay with you guys. Put your thumbs up if that's okay. That's it's done that thing again. Okay, it's just celebrating that we're going to give you some extra time. So best way to do this. I am not saying, oh yeah, I know what the other piece of information was. Got it. This is the slowest realm. Now, what I want you to imagine, and I'm hoping that you all drive, and if you don't, you wish you did. This is the realm where you learn to drive. And you get in the car and it's an intellectual process for the first time. So the first time, I don't remember the first time I got in a car because it was just so many decades ago. I am seriously old. But when I taught my son to drive, he got in my car in the big car park down the road where, when the store was closed, we went into the car park. And he sat in the car and he said, okay, he's been watching me drive for years and thinks, because I can do it, it must be easy, because mum's an idiot, right? So, you know, when you're 15, 16, 17, mum's like, God. And that's even if you can string a sentence together at that point, because the language is fluent grunt. But by the way, my son is brilliant and I love him to pieces, and he's an adult, he's in his 30s now. And what all that, so it's a very long time ago, but I so remember that first driving lesson because it was the last. He got in the car and he said to me, okay, where is everything? So I said, well, you first of all, sit down. You've got 3 pedals. It was a manual car. You've got 3 pedals. Accelerator, brake, clutch. You've got a steering wheel. And he's looking at me, rolling his eyes. Just listen. You've got indicators and lights. But the key that you need is the gear, is the interface of all of them. The handbrake. But regardless of all that, the first thing you've got to know is that you've got 3 mirrors and a front windscreen, which means you've got to know exactly what's going on now in present time and what you're doing. You've got to look in the rear view mirror every couple of minutes to make sure you know what's happened as the person in charge of what's happening. And you've got to look out the front and anticipate what's going to happen at all times. Can you imagine the look I got? Seriously. And then he said, why do I need 2 brakes? Sorry, why do I need 2 brakes? And why are there 3 pedals and I've only got 2 feet? He's brilliant, my son, actually, but he's also the eternal child archetype. So it's like this gorgeous, fresh awareness when he learns anything. It actually means once he's acquired it, he's quite brilliant with it, because everything starts on a clean slate with the eternal child. They just reduce everything down to why. And it was just brilliant. But anyway, I said to him, you've got 3 pedals because you are only ever going to have your right foot on the accelerator or the brake. Your left foot only does the clutch. When you said accelerator or brake, I thought you said I had a handbrake. You have. Why have I got 2 brakes, 2 feet, and 4 things? Well, because the handbrake, I can't even tell you, it was an intellectual argument. But here's the thing. Once you've practiced and repeated over and over and over again, this intellectual data, information, moves out of this realm into instinctive form. So information becomes form with the repetition and mimicry. So you mimic the teacher and you practice. And if you repeat it enough, they'll always tell you, anyone will tell you, magic happens, because this comes into here. This can't reach here. Now, why not? Because the speed of this is so slow. Look how long it took me to describe to him what, when you do it instinctively, you don't even think about it. You can now drive your car, listen to an audible book, and not miss a thing. You could be learning a language, because your mind isn't involved in what your instinctive body's doing necessarily. And this is what we might call our high self, the higher mind. This is our intuitive awareness. Some people call it their genius or their super genius. Can talk to you when you're awake in present time. History, mystery, magic, if you have access to both. Because what that means is you've done all your yoga training and you understand all the postures. You experience them in present time and you practice them. And you instinctively think, this doesn't feel right. What can I ask? Can I work? Can I da, 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 and you ask some questions about it. And you come in here and then you get your mind blown because you need to listen to your intuition that's telling you that that doesn't work for you. Your fascia is a very, very powerful communicator. It happens to be the largest sensory organ of your body. And that is what has completely blown the history out of the water. That means you are not biomechanical, you are bioemotional, because you are a biologic form in constant motion with energy running through you, i.e. emotion, and you sense it all the time. The biggest discovery of all time is very recent. It's a man called Martin Grunwald and work of people like Robert Schleip and Carla Stecco, both professors, who have discovered the haptic perception of the human form. Now, if you want to know what haptic means, it's very, very simple. And don't do it now, but later on, you can go into your mobile phones, go into the settings, and you will see a section called sounds and haptics. Haptic perception means feedback of proprioceptive awareness or feedback of touch skills. what's that got to do with a mobile phone? Well, everything. Think about it. When you tap your phone, when you double tap, when you swipe with 2 fingers, swipe with 3, swipe with 1, pull an image, spread an image, those touch information gestures get put into the phone, and the phone sends you feedback. That's called haptic feedback. That feedback may be visual, audio, or kinesthetic, because it can vibrate. So in yoga, that is yantra, mantra, tantra. Yantra is visible, mantra is audible, tantra is physical, kinesthetic. So yoga is already aware of what in NLP they call visual, audio, or kinesthetic. So the psychology that we're learning and the physiology that we're learning are not really separate. They are deep to the ancient wisdom of the Vedic sages, and they're not the only sages. But they started off with something called the flower of life, deep to their understanding of maths. And with maths or mathematics or math, I don't know what you call it in South Africa, has 3 categories. We have what's called secular maths. That's the realm of 1 + 1 is 2. That's the realm where you take $2 into a store and something's $1.50 and you get 50 cents back because you've given more than was required for the number on the box. This is the realm of symbolic maths. So in symbolic maths, we can talk about the maths of relationship. It takes 1 to say yes and 2 to say no. I beg your pardon, it takes 2 to say yes and 1 to say no. I got that back to front. It takes 2 to say yes and 1 to say no. Is the math of relationship. That's a symbolic way of using math. Symbolically, 1 and 1 is 11. It's true, right? When you do the number 11, happens to be a master number. 1 and 1. What's wrong with that? Now, somebody living in this realm will look at me and go, Jo, you're a nutcase. In whose world is 1 and 1 11? 1 and 1 is 2. Hello? They're just insisting on being intellectual, and I'm insisting on being symbolic. And if we don't have symbols and metaphors, we literally are not using our beautiful, creative right brain, because the right brain lives in metaphor. Metaphor means, meta means carry, and pherein means across. So it's literally carrying meaning across. In our left brain, everything's separate, isolated, and linear. In our right brain, everything is together, whole, integrated, and metaphorical. Allows us that transcript, that ability to transcribe one idea for another. So we've been living under the metaphor of biomechanics, and I'm inviting you to come across to incorporate all of that in a metaphor of bioemotional awareness. Bioemotional intelligence, in fact. The BI that we already have in here, every cell communicates haptically with every other cell. And the tissue holding them all together, this connective tissue, which this is all made of, the same connective tissue, the struts and the strands, it's all one tissue in the human body. It's only 2 tissues in the models, all one tissue, is intercommunicating haptically all the time. So what we're trying to do is make each one of you into a fascia whisperer, so that not only can you hear your own messages from within, we call it, MMIA stands for Myofascial Magic in Action, but I say it stands for the movement of magical inner awareness. Because that's when you've got your hands in front of you for cat-cow pose, and you don't understand why your body is really, really struggling. And after doing that for 6 months and you just aren't getting anywhere, you're not getting better at your postures, because basically you're jamming your tissue, you're giving it a message to say, keep still, go rigid, go static. And after a while it goes, okay, whatever. And it stiffens, and then you don't understand why you're getting neck and shoulder pain. And you can't, it's not necessarily that it's the way that you're doing cat-cow, but it is. So I'm not going to take you in the realm of re-study how cat-cow can cause injuries. I'm going to take you next week in our next session to the realm of how cat-cow can be one of the most beautiful things in the world from this intelligence, our bioemotional intelligence. It's magical. And Michelle, hold me to cat-cow as our key posture that we do, because there's two things I want to do: a seated twist and cat-cow, and it will change all the postures that you sent me. Every single one of them, you will change the way you do them. Because what we need is everything's in a round. If you think about it, the top of the leg bone is a round-ended bone. I know I'm not using technical terms, but there's enough of them in anatomy to sink a ship, and we need to keep moving. The acetabulum in the hip is a round area, so it's got a rounded range. But every myofascial continuum, there's no such thing as a muscle in the body. We're made of one piece. It's just tacked down in several hundred places. That's another leap. But basically, we're designed to move to some extent one way and to some extent another way by the spiral nature of our ligaments. We are not designed to do the splits. That's forcing. There's a consequence. When we move our arms, do this with me now. Take your arm, put your hand facing forward. Take your arm straight up and take it back behind your ear. Can you feel that it stopped? Can everybody feel that there's a point at which it stops? So now rotate your hand so that your palm is away from you. Rotate your body. Can you feel that stop is released? That is because you are honoring the organization of the spiral recoil within your system. It's already there. We are not designed to go up to here and force that range. Think about dog pose, hands on the ground, pressing the spine between the shoulder blades as if that's an asset. No, 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 no. Rotate the palm to the way that you're going, turn it all the way round, rotate your ribs, take them with you, and that hand will go round behind you quite easily. Now, I'm doing this on an arm. I had a diagnosis of breast cancer 2 years ago, and I had to have all the lymph nodes removed. I've got scars from here to here. And I had to use this micro movement intelligence to get my movement back. I did 12 minutes a day, thinking it would take me 12 months to recover. And it took me 12 weeks to be doing full weight bearing yoga. Now, I teach people and treat people a year on from such surgeries, and they've got cording and tethering, and their arm is still only comfortable in this position. Why? Because they didn't understand how to talk to their own fascial matrix. Now, I can usually rectify it even a year later. And that comes from the skills of training for 30 years and blah, blah, blah. But there's no need to get to that point if you know how to move well. And diagnoses of cancer are not uncommon anymore. The figures are something like 2 in 3. So the chances of you having yoga classes with people without scars from some form of surgery or another, or something, are not very high, sadly. So understanding how this all works means we can actually honor even scar tissue. Now, obviously I say that carefully, but I rarely come across somebody who hasn't got a C-section scar, an appendix scar, a surgical scar for one reason or another, not to mention the emotion that gets woven in with the fascial matrix repair of that scar. Now, some of it is dealt with through manual therapy, but so much can be done through movement if only we understand the dose and degree, when we know how to use movement as medicine rather than a goal. And I cannot tell you how many people I meet for whom their yoga is a goal, their Pilates is a goal, their Tai Chi is a goal, their martial arts is a goal. How many belts can I get? And yet Paul will tell me that he works with these masters, these triple, quadruple black belts, these geniuses. And on the mat in the dojo, they are like, oh my God, they're unbelievable. They go into the changing room and they can't take their t-shirt off over their head because their necks don't move. Now, Paul is 53. He's been doing martial arts since he was 7 years old. He's a triple black belt in karate, and he's now, I think, a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's 53 years old, and he does jiu-jitsu every single morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he's pain-free every time he shows up for a class. His colleagues aren't, and he's older than most of them. But he understands how to restore his body fully so that every time he does a set in the dojo or whatever it's called, he can recover, because the body is an amazing, amazing instinctive system. And when we teach movement in the realm like we teach driving, we're stuck here. This is form. This is transformation. Now, look, did I do that? Is that what? This is transformation. So information, form, transformation. And form changes all the time, moment to moment. So what I wanted to do really was set you that context and see if you've got any questions. I've still got a slideshow. Oh my God, Michelle, what am I doing? I could be here for a week. And I just want to know if you've got any questions at this point so that I can include the right things. And yeah. Any questions about any of that? Or are you all sitting there thinking, what the hell is she talking about? It's fine if you are. Michelle, go for it.
I'm interested in this, the idea of sort of like using the earth as a rebounding, as a way of rebounding, because I think a lot of times, especially in the postural yoga, it's a sense of like rooting and staying in a posture and having like a very firm, solid base.
Yeah, brilliant.
And so how to actually get that back into the movement magic of it, where you're actually using that, like you're speaking about the ground force reactivity to assimilate the whole body from the ground upwards.
Brilliant question. So let's imagine that, let me think. Do any of you use balls like this in your yoga class? Put a hand up. No, you don't. No, we tend not to, do we? So what I'm going to say to you all is, next time you come on the next one, can you get hold? I'll send you a link for these, Michelle. They're really, like, in English, £5-6 on Amazon. Will we have time to get them from Amazon in the meantime? Are there?
Not Amazon, but I can source them here.
Can you? And get them for everybody? That would be so great.
What kind of size, diameter? Do you want to send me the
7-inch, 9-inch, the cheapest ones. They don't have to be huge. Now I want to show you something about a round thing. This is my friend Anna Beretsteggen's balls, special ones. They're very, very thick. And what I love about this, this is like pretty solid. What I'm going to do is let some air out of it. Oh, Katja has access to overballs. I have to use this pin to let the air out. So what I'm going to do is just squeeze some air out of this ball. It's made of a very, very thick stuff. She has them specially made. Okay, can you see that's deformed now? Yeah, because I've taken the air out. I'm going to pull the pin out and I want you to see what happens without me doing anything. I'm not touching it. I'm just supporting it. That's how we breathe. It's a natural process. One of the things that happens in yoga, in my experience, is we get very into grounding the feet and dominating the breath or controlling the breath. And what I want you to see from this is, I can't get the air out of that now properly. I have to put this back in to really do it quickly. This is a tensegrity architecture. It's a round thing. So as I'm pushing on it, it's resisting deformation, but I'm taking the insides of it out. And as soon as I take this out, the pressure differential between the inside and the outside naturally refills. Now, our breath is beautifully, beautifully understood. Oops, I've got so many models here. They're all sticking to each other. I'm just showing you that that's going to do the same thing every time. So that's what we call a restorative, built-in restorative benefit. And a built-in restorative benefit is something we can work with. It's not something we have to dominate. Now, this is a Hoberman sphere. And What it is, again, it's a model of force transmission. These are all models of force transmission. Yes, like the Kapalabhati breath, Jenny, exactly. But what I want you to know is it's not that the Kapalabhati breath has got to be done properly and all this business. And I've seen people having competitions for how many people can do that. And the other thing I see is this till they're collapsed, when of course it's a tiny, tiny movement in an upright position. Obviously, I'm just doing that as a quick overview. I'm not talking about any of you. I'm just saying these ideas of forced power. And I literally I've seen 5 or 6 men in a row. It was male, I have to say. And they were all fighting to who could do the most. And then, honestly, it was another thing. So this, in the human body, this is an example of how a round thing can expand and appear to contract, but there's always the same amount of material and everything's joined to everything else. So this is representing, if you will, the mesh of the fascia around things. Yeah. Now, we do not collapse. We are like open umbrellas. Imagine opening an umbrella. It's not a tensegrity, but it is a tension compression architecture. But we're in the round. We don't have a thing up the middle. We have a spine, but we're surrounded. Every single cell is like 2 umbrellas meeting. And if you look at the back of your hand, go like that, look at the back of my hand, that's like the spokes of the umbrella. So the fabric is tensioned by the spokes. Now, don't go around thinking that that means the bones are tensioning the myofascia. It sort of does, and it sort of doesn't, because the bones themselves are tensegrities. There's a bit like, what do you mean? Well, what I mean is that every one of these sticks and every single one of these strands is one of these. The microcosm and the macrocosm and the cosmic are all the same, which is exactly the same as us. So don't worry about getting that at the moment, but just understand that we begin here. So when we're breathing, we inhale actively and we passively exhale. But then we exhale actively and we passively inhale. So what do I mean by that? So just do it with me. Find yourself a comfortable sitting position. Just very, very gently breathe in. When you get to the top of the breath, pause and let go. Breathe out, just soft. And that is the ground of the breath when you're neither breathing in nor breathing out. Let's do it again. Inhale. Expand to your limit. Hold. Exhale. Stop. Now, at that point, I now want you to actively exhale. So squeeze the breath out. Extra, more. Relax. And you automatically inhale. So I see the breath as a kind of a Mobius. And we'll teach this. The 3 things we're going to do next weekend. We're going to do cat-cow. We're going to do seated recoil. And we're going to do what I call the universal breath technique, or the elastic breath. And what that's doing is animating 4 phases of this. So the active exhale, the passive inhale. The active inhale, if I could pull this out, and the passive exhale. Most people, particularly older people, only live in this half. They inhale and they exhale. When you go to most classes, inhale for 1, exhale for 1 or 2, or whatever the thing is. But there's 1 in and 1 out. When actually there's a continuum of an active exhale, which is Kapalabhati, as you said, which allows the inhale back in. So we live in the middle, and we inhale actively, and then the natural pull back is an exhale. And then we can exhale actively, and the natural is an inhale. So the body's always moving through this beautiful Mobius loop of the breath, because it's animating the elastic recoil and the integral nature of our spirit. It's all one. We are the anima animus in physical form. And what we've done by designing and imposing postures over ourselves is we've lost the original plot a bit. Plus the fact we've tried to squeeze yoga into the National Health Services. We're trying to get yoga into schools. Because we're trying to slow people down. We're trying to make people more self-aware, because yoga is actually a practice of integrating and unifying all aspects of us. In Surat Shabda Yoga, that is the physical, astral, causal, mental, etheric, and soul. And that means we're bringing the positive in through all the negatives. That means we're consciously and conscientiously becoming living love in the face of all the criticism and horrors that we have to deal with. It's bringing our awareness into our energy in motion at all times and accepting it the way that it is. So some ways it's said is that we learn to feel our feelings. Well, fascia is your largest sensory organ. It feels everything. It works in feels. So when we become fascia whisperers and we listen to our own fascia, we're animating the understanding of those feelings, and we start speaking fluent fascia. And we know that when we've got our hands fixed and our elbows locked and our hands are under our shoulders for cat-cow, the body hates it, because we're forcing the spine into a position and we're forcing the shoulder blades into a position and we're holding the neck in a linear way. And what we find is that that is actually stultifying and inhibiting natural motion. That doesn't mean we can't do cat-cow. That means we do cat-cow honoring the natural rebound, recoil, release, restore, and refine that's available to us. And that cat-cow feeds the system the way it is. It's a little bit mysterious, but it's absolutely delicious when you do it in a way that honors the body's rebound and recoil. Now, what happens is, to go back to using your words, Michelle, when we press the hands into the ground, and we often we're told to really concentrate on the heels of the hands to get the grounding and get the heels of the feet in there as well, or knees if we're doing cat-cow. I'm thinking dog pose. Let me just share one of the pictures that you sent. Let's find, did you put cat-cow in here? Well, let's look here. So here the hands are ahead, that's fine. But here's a perfect plank or phalangasana. We've got shoulders. I know you don't do it like this anymore, Michelle, so I'm not even pretending that this is how you would do it now, but you sent me this lovely picture. This is not a natural position for a healthy spine. And what I want you all to look at is that little dip there with, there's a little lump. So what Michelle's neck is doing in this picture, I don't know if I can expand that a bit. Let me just stop the share and see if I can expand that picture. I'm not criticizing, I'm telling you why that posture would hurt you. And I know you don't do it anymore. And thank you for sharing these absolutely gorgeous pictures of you. Oh, I want to do so much. I want to do the slideshow. We're not on it yet. So what's happening here is it's very, very unusual for the human body to have the legs completely straight. Think about that in terms of natural movement. When do you stand with your legs straight? So what are you serving? That's what my question is. Also, what's going on here? Can you see the dip in the back of the neck? And the shoulder blades up here can't move. The elbows can't move. The wrists can't move. And the weight is mostly on the thenar muscles, these guys here. Most of the weight is here. I just want you to be aware of that. And what I want you to do for homework between this week and next, are you ready to write this down? Is I want you to have a go at this posture with the hands in front of the shoulders, wider than the shoulders, and the weight on the hypothenar muscle through the little finger only. So the thumb is free. So that's one piece of homework. So instead of hands in front and jammed and elbows locked, hands are wide. The weight is through the little finger, through the outside. And I want you to be able to move your shoulder blades. And I want you, if you can do it in front of a mirror or get somebody to photograph you, I want you to tell me what happens to the shape of your back. Now, I know in this pose, and I know, Michelle, you told me you don't do it like this anymore. I know in this pose, what you're seeking to do is make this a straight line. But notice what your neck is doing to hold your head up because it's heavy. And that is coming out of this lock that your hands, elbows, and shoulders, they're actually blocking two major parts of your body. We'll look at that next week, whenever it is. Can anyone guess what those two things that you're blocking are in this posture done this way? Just look around here. This isn't rocket science. What could you be blocking here? Or inhibiting is a better word. It's not blocked, it's inhibited.
Are you referring to a muscle or energetic pressure? What are you referring to?
Whatever you think.
I would say the engagement of the shoulders. Maybe you limit that in terms of the straight elbows.
And what would you think you might be affecting, Victoria?
Within the upper torso, maybe your breath even.
Well, it's not even, it's very directly your breath. And what's the other thing? Have a look, what's here?
Your chest.
What's in your chest? What's the biggest deal in your chest?
Your heart.
Yeah, hello, heart and lungs. So what you're doing is you're jamming this natural process. And what do you think happens when the lungs can't breathe properly?
You close off your oxygen.
Well, you don't go that far, but what you're basically doing is what I want you to think about is that the heart sits inside those two lungs. It's literally wrapped in them. So embryologically, the heart grows 6 buds, 2 lungs, 2 arms, 2 legs. And the lungs are first, closely followed and almost simultaneous with the arms around the outside, the lungs around the inside. So there's something inside us called the mediastinum, and it means heart stand or middle stand. So when you take the heart out of the body, the lungs literally sit like a stand in this shape where they've held the heart, not Valentine, it's like an egg on its side, but it sits there. Now, if any of you have done any of the Heart Math Institute's work, it's all about heart coherence. And that's all about bringing the breath into the heart and becoming coherent in our heart. I mean, why this stuff was separated in the first place completely wrecks my head. But anyway, we'll let that go for the moment. But absolutely brilliant, Victoria. Can you see that what Michelle's doing in this picture, and I'm using you as an example, Michelle, don't take anything personally, and I've no doubt you don't do it like that anymore. But that locked elbow and that locked wrist and that hand, which is weighted through the thenar, not the hypothenar, means, so this is a continuum, the hypothenar all the way down the outside of the arm, the tricep, straight to the spine is a continuum. So by locking into this, you're locking the front. The back can't move, it daren't. So you are just putting a stopper through the ribs, through any rotational ability, and your default is rotation. So let me show you that now, just where you're sitting in your chair. This is so simple and gorgeous. Sit in your chair. You can't see me, I know, but I'm not sure that I can set it up so that you can. We're going to do this by feels. You with me? You with me, Victoria? You okay? Thumbs up. Yeah. You know, I'm not telling anybody off. I'm just excited to reveal to you how you already are. Brilliant. So what I want you to do is think about your pelvis. I can't really show you on here, but I'm going to have a go. Notwithstanding this bloody pole down the middle, you've got a coccyx at the bottom of the diamond. You've got a sitting bone on either side of the diamond, and you've got a pubic bone on the top of the diamond. So can you see that's a diamond? Yeah. I don't know how much anatomy you've all got. I don't want this to be heavy duty on anatomy. So let me stop sharing so that you can see me, and I will remove the other spotlights so that no one feels self-conscious. There we go. So we're standing, this is called the urogenital triangle, the front one. It's all called the urogenital diamond, maybe. Anyway, so we've got a front triangle and a back triangle, anterior and posterior. So sitting where you're sitting, can you all feel that if you rock back and tuck your tailbone under a bit, imagine you're sitting with your tail between your legs, that you're on the posterior urogenital triangle. Yeah, can everybody just put your hands up and let me know that you've got it? Yeah, great. So you're on your coccyx and your two sitting bones, the ischial tuberosities and the coccyx. Yeah. Now, can everybody feel in that position that the whole of the back of the body is in a C curve? Yeah. And the natural place to keep that C curve congruent is that the head is slightly forward of the chest. Yes? Can everybody get that? Yeah, great. Now, in that position, can you also feel that your breastbone is closer to your pubic bone than it was before? Great. Now I want you to put your hands one over the other in front of you, just like I am. And all I want you to do in this position is rotate. Now don't go past your natural stop. Just see how far the rotation is. Just feel, particularly between your ribs and hips, how far that rotation is. Your feet are about hip width apart and they're flat on the floor, by the way. And you're in that slumped position. So sideways on, you're all in a C curve. Okay, and rest your hands. Now, the other thing I want you to do is put one hand forward as if you were pointing at your screen. You can see my fingers coming as if I was about to press a button on my screen. Put your other hand, your fingertips where your heart is. And as if you were going to point on that screen, push that forward hand more. Can you feel that your heart moves back? Can everybody feel that? Brilliant. So your heart is moving away from your screen the more you push the other hand towards it. And it's curling you under even more. Yeah. And the back of your waist is pointing that way behind you. And your ears, if I had great big long earrings, they'd be dangling onto my thighs. Yes? Yeah, great. Brilliant. So just blah, blah, blah. Now we're going, that blah, blah, blah means, you know, unravel, let it all go. Now we're going to go onto the anterior urogenital triangle, meaning the pubic bone and the sitting bones. So we have to sit ourselves up. We have to obviously tilt our pelvis forward, keep your feet hip width apart, your heels on the floor. And can you feel that you have a completely different shape in the back of your spine? Yes, everybody. So notice if you just put a hand on the back of your head, that if you were to drop a cord down from that now, it would run down the back of your spine between your shoulder blades. And if I had earrings on, they'd only go as far as my shoulders. Yeah, they wouldn't be forward. They would be, so sideways, I look much more like an S curve. Make sense? Everybody with me? Brilliant. So now place your hands one on top of the other. And now notice how far you can rotate. Tell me if that's changed. Anybody found it's like somewhere between 10 and 50 degrees more rotation? Oh God, here we go. Yes. So why is that? Well, the reason for that is your body's predicated on recoil. And when you take the natural curve out of the lumbar spine, can you see it's actually locked? See, it's got these great long pedicles, feet, pediatric, well, pedicle, pied à terre. These lumbar spine vertebrae are interlocked in that position, and our coccyx, our sacrum is the roof of our pelvis, and our coccyx is our little tail. So when we've got our tail out behind us, this is not a very good model, I must tell you, but when we've got our tail out behind us, these are interlocked. They are designed to forward and back bend. They're not designed to rotate particularly, but they are designed to be in the opposite of a C curve, because the other ones above, can you see they don't have very big feet? See, look, compare the feet on L5 with the feet on T12, T11, T10, T9, T8. Can you see the feet are disappearing as we go up? And what's also happening, if you look sideways, the spinous processes are pointing over each other, whereas these are much more square to stop us overarching. These are designed to cumulatively rotate through the upper spine, and that cumulative rotation is stopped by the ribs. So we're already designed to have these beautiful curves because that's how we bounce. And we're designed that each section is like the section of an orchestra. These are the deep notes, these are the high notes, and they integrate through their shape all the way through. Now, I want you to do something else. Still up on your sitting bones with that lovely curve in the back of your body. And I want to tell you, when I'm sitting for hours writing, and I have to sit for hours, Jenny, it's not a problem. You'll pick up the recording. I deflate one of these to about half, and I put it in that place in my back. So I'm constantly moving, I'm constantly rocking, even as I'm typing, and I'm not giving myself the possibility of backache or back strain or sedentary postural problems. They just don't happen because I'm sitting like this, moving. The other aspect of this is, notice what happens in this position when you point forward. Point forward, come forward, come forward, come forward. Does anybody notice that the heart moves forward and you're folding at the groin? It's a totally different movement. What it is that the spine knows, the fascia of the spine knows haptically that it's safe to rotate, which is its default. So now we're going to do stage 3, and this is where the magic happens. I want you to place one foot closer to the chair, slightly under your knee, and one foot slightly further away so that your feet are staggered. And then I want you to bring your hands up, however you want them, something like that. And I want you to move towards and away from the forward leg. Now your feet are flat on the floor. Slow it down. You're all doing much too big a movement. And I want you to drive the movement from the feet that are in a staggered position. So one leg's in front, one leg's behind. Everyone's got their favorite, by the way. That's why I didn't say put your left leg in front and your right leg behind. So all I want you to do is almost as if you were walking, but bringing your arms across the body. Can you feel as if you're sitting walking? Is everybody feeling that? If I call it that, great. So now we're going to just change the feet over. Now, bear in mind that the one that's forward has a natural stop. The one that's backward, you could carry on going away from. So when you're standing, you would actually fall if you turned away from it. We'll get into that later. That's about walking, but this is different. Now, swap feet over, put the other one in the front, the other one further back. And then you're going to feel the same thing in reverse. And all of you will have a preferred way. Forgive yourself for your preference. Do not try and make them symmetrical because you're not. That is what we call honest movement. That is what we call an honest assessment of our recoil abilities. And that is what we call you save your life by knowing this, because we're going to take it to the next stage. So choose the one that you preferred. And what I now want you to do is put the back foot onto your toes so your heel is up. So I'm bouncing mine at the moment. I've got my left toes on the ground. My left heel is above the ground and I'm bouncing it. And my right foot is in front and flat on the floor. So back to what I like. My favorite is right first, turning towards the right. And what we're going to do is rotate and rotate. So now we're bringing the toes of the one foot and the heel of the other foot. So the forward foot, it's heel, the back foot, it's toe. And we're going to bounce up and down and up and down. So you come up as you move towards the front foot. So we come up as we move towards the front foot and down as we roll away from it. Up and down, up and down. And now just relax. We're going to change sides and it's going to feel different. And all I want you to do is know that feeling. That's all I want you to do. Okay. So just work your way in. Now your other foot is on its toes. nearest you, under the chair slightly, and the front foot is flat on the floor. Yes? So just work your way in, spiraling. So as you spiral towards the front foot is the action. Towards the front foot is the action. Breathe in and exhale up. And that's it, just a little bit of that. Now, did anybody notice a difference from left to right? It's quite unusual not to. What you just did was you honored your spring-loaded recoil. And what I want to ask you is, how is this honoring spring-loaded recoil, or do you think it's building in a spring-loaded recoil inhibition? Just want you to think about it. Now, here, the strain is even greater on Michelle because her rotator cuff is completely jammed. Her shoulder blades cannot move. Her little fingers are balancing the weight she's putting through her thumbs, and her neck is completely shortened. I don't know how you're breathing, Michelle, to be frank, but anyway, that's another thing. But she's light on her toes because she's so super fit. But look at the spine. If it's held in that straight position, which it's not designed to be, what are you doing? What are you building into the spine? I know it's Chaturanga, Dandasana, forelimb stuff, and it's really important. What are you building into the spine? This is what you were taught, honey. Do not blame yourself and do not put your head in your hands because you're doing it beautifully. That's better-ish, but this, we'll talk about that. Yeah. So I'm looking for dog pose. Oh, is that the first one? Is it right at the beginning? There it is. There it is. Just tell me what any of you think is going on here. Bearing in mind that you have a pelvic foot and you have never seen a dog in your entire life standing up with its heels on the ground. They sit with their heels on the ground. They do not stand with their heels on the ground. But what is happening here is that Michelle is inviting pelvic floor problems. It's an invitation. They're hard to avoid. Not to mention the fact that the shoulder girdle, which is in direct relationship, you just found that out when you stood up. And we can go into much more depth with this. We can do standing spirals, and you will actually see how when you walk, you have to walk towards the opposite leg. Otherwise, if you move your torso away from the forward leg, you'll fall. These are techniques for turning and changing direction. Why are they so important? Because as people get older, and these are the people that you're talking to and teaching, as they get older and they don't understand the spiral foundation of the body's formation, it's a spiral tube with a counter spiral tube. Ida, Pingala, Sushumna arises, energy arises from balancing the counter chirality of these tubes. I haven't shown you the slideshow yet. It's doing my head in now. I can't fit it all in. But anyway, but the spine is jammed between the shoulder blades. Now, in most worlds, that's a beautiful dog pose, Michelle. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm sitting here freaking out what you're doing to your upper back. I'm like, Jesus, how's she breathing? See what I mean? So first of all, I would have her on her toes, because here's the key. Any movement you're in, every single one of what you call a joint should be able to move. Why? Because we have to honor the joint spaces. And when we're doing a linear practice, we are jamming joints because we're non-linear. So this is a gymnastic achievement in my world, not a natural yoga expression of a fluid, supple body. And I know I'm challenging the most basic yoga postures. Brilliant that you can do it, but tell me when in life you do that. I mean, seriously, what's it training you for? I mean, these are great. These are lovely. These are great ways of strength. And the reason I love this one is because you've got your heel off the ground. Your back heel is off the ground, which is where it belongs. And you can move it back and forth. And you've got a gorgeous arch to the back. And if this isn't stiff, this can move and you could rotate in that position and you could do what we just did, that counter rotation movement with the upper body. So that crescent lunge is lovely. That's criminal. I know, look at you. But look what you're doing to yourself. Your body's not designed to do that. Now, if you had your ankle, your heels up and your knees slightly bent and you were playing with it, I'd get it. But look, perfect C curve. And listen, trust me, I when I'm watching personal trainers teaching crunches, or in Pilates, they're doing things like the Pilates 100, and I just can't even tell you. Feldenkrais, they pull on the back of the head to lift up to do breathing, absolutely wrecks my head. It is so, so detrimental. That's beautiful. That's just a beautiful balance. That's stunning. But look what the back does naturally. That's home. That's arms where they belong. Now, you could rotate your arms in that position. Can you see the freedom in that? That's absolutely stunning. That means I can balance. I reckon you could get up on your toes on the standing leg and not have a problem. Why? Because the knee's bent, because it's talking to itself. Because you're using the heel as a resting point. You're not jamming it into the ground. Can you see the lack of force in this posture? The only thing in this posture that I maybe would query is that the elbows and the upper knee are not really soft. They're a little bit straight. But apart from that, it's utterly beautiful. There's no question about your yoga. And what I know is that you could rotate your whole torso. Can everybody see that Michelle could rotate her torso towards the standing leg? Can you see that? She'd be able to do that beautifully. And I know if this hand came down, we'd see a long neck, not a short jammed one, like we saw here. Where's the jammed one? The one that freaked me out. That one. That's a ticket to trouble. That's like, no way. That's beautiful. That's beautiful too, but I think you're pulling on this psoas a little bit, and that would be a problem for a lot of people, but it's still beautiful. Revolt, what else have we got here? Yeah, lots. Don't even show me that. Oh my God. Okay, that'll do for now. Are you getting the gist of what I'm looking at, guys? So all we're doing is honoring the bones and the resting points and giving them range to move. Now, besides the balls, I want you to get something else for next time if you can. And that's one of these. This is the lightest resistance flexi band. Can you get hold of those? Yeah, the lightest resistance. You need about 2 meters, or if you fold it in half from one shoulder to the opposite hand is about right for everybody. If you have one of these and one of these, so look, I've got these in all different sizes. That's a smaller one. That's a bigger one. Have one of each, and you can start bringing some natural rebound. Now, I'm not saying don't do dog pose. What I'm saying is honor the corners, if you will, or the joints that aren't joints. Think of them as resting points. And the foot and the ankle are the complete and utter keystone to pelvic health. Like beyond belief. And when we jam the heel back and flatten the foot, we're actually pulling the arch, we're contorting the arch, we're distorting the spring-loaded arch of the foot. And I think we're jamming the ankle to try and compensate, and it's pelvic floor. Paul calls it the pelvic foot, and it's a great name for it. So on that note, are there any last-minute questions before I love and leave you? I know I haven't shown you the slideshow, but it's all about sacred geometry, so we'll do that next time. Can you see why I didn't want to go to the postures first? Can you take away with you the idea that this is great, but this is where we've been doing yoga? So we've been doing yoga intellectually for years, because that's what we do in the West. And let me tell you, when Iyengar came to this country to teach yoga, his first task, because I worked with Angela Farmer and she was taught by him, as was Victor, her husband. And he came to the UK to teach young men in the military to handle their sexual desires. And that's what we call yoga. It's not a feminine practice, it's a masculine practice. Now, one of the big, huge differences between the male and the female body is that the male body has a fairly constant feed of testosterone, and the female body has estrogen doing that, and then progesterone doing that. And here's my take on it. And this, I mean, you can quote me if you want, it's a bit bonkers. There's a man called Richard Dawkins who's written a fabulous book called, many fabulous books, but in one of them, he's talking about how over the last 100 years, weathermen have tried to predict the weather. And what they had to learn when they learned to study the weather and understand the weather, and you may have heard this before, is that the wings of a butterfly moving in the Amazon rainforest can cause a cyclone on the other side of the planet. And in fact, the monarch butterfly, the most amazing creature on the planet, flies thousands of miles to migrate to the Amazon rainforest. And the way they keep warm, I love this, is they wrap themselves, all of them, together in a complete community around the trees, overlapping their wings, so they form a blanket. So collectively, they keep each other warm as a collective. They are a union of monarch butterflies. I mean, I just find that absolutely unbelievably incredible. Anyway, so what you can imagine is when the sun starts to come up to warm their wings, it's not one butterfly in the Amazon rainforest, it's freaking millions of them. Okay, so what they did was they found a name to understand the weather, and a word or phrase, and that phrase was sensitivity dependent periodicity. And you think to yourself, what on earth? Sensitivity, okay, dependent, so it depends on sensitivity, okay, meaning however sensitive the thing itself is what properties emerge from it. So sensitivity dependent, periodicity, cyclical time zones. And I thought to myself, oh my God, women are incarnate, incorporated, embodied sensitivity dependent periodicity. We even call the cycles that we go through periods. I'm like, hang on a second. Our whole life is about adolescence to puberty, or coming to puberty. We get to puberty with childbearing so we can create the human race. We can do it without men, by the way, but parthenogenesis means that we can produce, it's from piercing the egg in a certain way, but that human won't be able to reproduce. So parthenogenesis is known as a possibility, but when they do it in rabbits, the rabbits that are born through this piercing of the egg in exactly the right place, it's a skill, the rabbits that are born are not able to reproduce. So anyway, that's just a side thing. So we then go through this period of our lives over a period of time of sensitivity dependent periodicity that we can produce eggs. Now, archetypally, we're just the opposite end of the male. We produce 400 to 500 eggs in our entire lifetime. And let me tell you, every single one of them is present in your embryonic body when your mother was nurturing you. Which means you were an egg present in her body when she was in your grandmother. Which means she was an egg present in her grandmother's body when she was an embryo in her great-grandmother. So we are the living continuum of sensitivity dependent periodicity. So men have spent the last 150 to 200 years trying to understand the weather, trying to manage the weather, trying to control the weather. We are the weather. We already are the weather. We are sensitivity dependent periodicity incarnate. And after we finish that cycle and we go through what we call menopause, and we're all over the place, and trust me, in Victorian times, women were put in prisons and psychiatric homes and attics and all sorts of stuff for going mad. It was just menopause. Why it's called menopause is another whole discussion, but we won't even go there. And I'm not anti-men. I adore them. I worship my son. He's amazing. And I love his dad, even though I'm not with him anymore. And my father, oh my God, do I love my dad. God bless his soul. So I'm not anti-men. I'm not whatever the opposite of a misogynist is. But what I'm telling you is that we are the weather. And that sensitivity means we cannot jam our bodies into linear, biomechanically functioning yoga poses. And I don't care what name you give them. We are round. We surround our own tissues. We are grounded through them for every moment that we're on the ground. And we spiral and counter spiral. What do I mean by chirality? This is the last piece that you must have. Notice that if you take your two hands and you put them over each other, they don't match. If you had your ears and you needed an ear transplant and you damaged your right ear, you can't grow another left ear to put on the right side. Yes, because they are exact opposite shapes of each other. So we can put our hands together, but we can't. They're not the same. They are opposites. So chirality means handedness. Every single piece of fascia inside of our bodies has a hand going this way, a spiral, it's a triple helix, hand going this way, and one going through the middle, but they're all bound and spiraled together. And every strand is made of 3 of those. So everything in us is a triple helix, is the fabric that makes the form in all its different textures. So this is a very, very fine version of what I had before. You know, this is one of the tubes you find over a flower when you buy flowers. If you can get them from the florist or Amazon to show your clients, do. We are currently assessing the body as if it was made like this, 2D, 2 dimensions, length and height, or length and breadth. Yeah, 2D, 2-dimensional. That's what that means. Now, this is what happens when people take a sample of fascia and put it between 2 clamps and pull on it and then measure its stretchability. It's totally ridiculous. It doesn't exist in the body like this. So for me, that research is like, yeah, well, that's all very interesting. We could do that with a piece of tree or a piece of grass or a piece of leaf or a piece of paper. You do what you like with it. It's been cut out of its environment. That's not how it behaves in the human body. In the human body, it is considered to be 3D. Yes. So it's got a diameter, a length, and a breadth. So that makes it 3-dimensional. Yes, length, breadth, and depth or height. So it would be a graph with not just a Z and a Y axis, sorry, an X and a Y axis. It's got an X, Y, and a Z axis. But here's the thing. It's not square either. It's round. So how do we make this round? Well, we have to take it in what for me is the 4th dimension, which means it has to move through itself, which is exactly how the embryo forms. It moves through itself. Now you can see there's a tube down the middle formed of a tube. Can you see that? That is what I did before, but you couldn't see it so well. This is a spinal disc, and the nucleus pulposus is in the middle, which is where it belongs. But when we do all that stuff with the spine, can you see what's happening to the middle when we do this stuff that means we bend our spine the wrong way too much because we force it? Can you see what's happening to the nucleus pulposus? That's a herniation in progress. And if it pops that and that nucleus pulposus comes out, the fluid in there leaks onto the nerves and you are in serious pain. So it's really important that we honor the original shape of the spine. And the nearest I have to this model is this. So it looks round in 2D, but actually that's chirality. This is made out of one piece. And this is a model of both you and your energy field. Now I can show you this. There there's the disc that you just saw. That's the model of the spinal disc. See how it can move in all directions. Sorry, my computer's trying to update. Now, what's really gorgeous is we can even put the annulus pulposus into the middle. It's gorgeous, isn't it? And these are called arm slinkies. I absolutely love them. And of course, this is all spiraling one way, but imagine that if you had another one within this spiraling the other way, you would have the chiral and the counterchiral, which would mean, let me show you. Imagine this is the piece cut out of the middle. There's one going that way, which resists deformation if you put too much pressure on it, and one going the other way. And if you imagine one of those inside the other, what you have is a thicker skin, chirals and counterchirals. And what that means is if you look at the pictures of the blood vessels, what they're actually made of is tube going that way and a tube going that way. And the more tubes, they're called tunicae, that there are, the stronger the vessel. So it's likely to be a main artery. And the thinner ones are exactly the same. They just don't have so many tunicae. They don't have so many layers. It's incredible. That's how we're designed. So what we're doing with you is training you to see the optimal design. What I want you to think of is that you've got a tube. Think of a leg or an arm. This is a tube. And inside each one of these bits is a little twisty bit because it needs to be articulate in its gestures. So that's where it articulates. But what's inside there is a completely dynamic system of different architectures. So this is harder. It's got hydroxyapatite in it. This is ligamentous. There's cartilage in there, which has got like a substance in it called hyaline, which is a little bit like nylon that makes it nice and compactive. But the inside the knee, for example, in the knee capsule, the cartilage on the knee, people think it's really hard because the knee does that. So if you do that to yourself, just bounce like that over and over. Tell me how many times you have to do that before it hurts. Like maybe a dozen. Like it's like, is she nuts? So what I want you to know is that the living cartilage inside your knees is boiled egg white in texture. So I want you to imagine how essential it is that those bones do not touch each other. Something is pulling them apart. Nothing in this touches anything else. None of the harder parts touch the other parts. This architecture is keeping them apart just as powerfully as it's holding them together so that they can move and articulate on each other, but they don't crunch into each other. They never touch. So these compression struts are floating in a sea of tension due to their structural organization. And that is precisely how your body's organized. When you know that, you can honor that in multi-dimensions. And what will happen is every single posture you teach, bar none, one, you'll be able to read the person you're teaching it to. Two, you'll be able to bring them into that motion in a way that works for them. So they get better and better and softer and easier and more supple. And no matter what age they are, I taught my father till he was 87 yoga, and my oldest client was 98 when she died, and she was still completely mobile. And she died for other reasons, lungs. And just, I can't even tell you, you can keep that going if you understand to honor the spaces. Honor the spaces. Are they mobile? Ask yourself in every posture, can I move every single bone in my body? And if you can't, you're not in the right position. That doesn't mean you can't balance. That doesn't mean you can't do dog pose. That doesn't mean you can't do child pose. That doesn't mean you can't restore and receive and all of that. You can do all of it. It doesn't mean you can't do cat-cow. You do it in a way that honors your breath and your heart, and that will make sure that everything else works. Because that requires a beautiful waving shape of the spine. It requires a counterchiral movement between the head and the ribs and the ribs and the pelvis and the pelvis and the feet. And when we get these counterchirals, it's a bit like this. Paul does this. He said, you know, if we unscrew this, the bottle and the lid have got to go in opposite directions. open, close, open, close, open, close. And it's that freedom of motion that releases the innate recoil in the formation of the form. And that innate recoil means a spring in your step, a leap in your stride. The pelvis travels through the air when you run. You use the ground like a treadmill from under you. And when I first learned this, I went to the gym one day and I got on the treadmill and I really got into it and just running the treadmill under my feet. The next thing I know, I was flat on my face on the floor because I couldn't slow the machine down. And I can't even tell you, I felt such an idiot. And I didn't know that what I was doing was actually optimal. Everyone laughed at me, and my son said, "Mum, I heard you fell off the machine at the gym." And I was like, I didn't go back, but I wish I had, because I get to work with Wilbur Kelsick, Dr. Wilbur Kelsick, and he's one of the head coaches with the Canadian Olympic team and the World Athletics Association. And he just said, "Man, you were traveling the pelvis, man, that's great." And I was like, no, I was totally embarrassed and ashamed. And I just didn't know that what I was doing was so optimal. I just had this idea that I'm too heavy, I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm not a runner. And it was the story and the narrative that I can't that actually embarrassed me beyond belief. And it was such a shame because, and I'm going to go back to doing it in my own way. But we're not actually designed to run on treadmills. We're designed to run on the ground. We're designed to roll the planet under our feet. Does that make sense? Yeah, we're born to fly. So there you go. I've gone a long way over. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Joanne. I really appreciate all of your time, all of your knowledge. Thank you so, so much.
Well, I hope I've kind of blown a hole in what you were thinking, and I hope I've this was, what was Tamlin written here? Oh my goodness. This was the best meditation on life disguised as a fascialist. Thank you. Well, here's the thing, Tamlin. I think we're all bio-emotional beings, and I think we are amazing. And I think if we really knew that, we wouldn't be so easily controlled, because we all live in a world of absolute fear of what's going to happen next, because we're shoved in here, and this is the law. Everything in here is where law lives, in the negative realms. This is our access to grace. And you have to do both. You have to have both. You know, there's no good me driving along at 100 miles an hour and just expecting the world to suit me and not give me a speeding ticket. Hello. Let's accept that that's the local law. So I live within the local law as far as I can when I'm able. Mostly, I try to think it's 100% of the time, but it isn't. I drive within the speed limit. And then I don't bump into more law than I have to. Like my son and I were traveling last week, and I was like, average speed zone. And he's looking at me going, yeah. I'm going, average speed zone, which meant look at the clock, calm down. There's no point in butting up against the law. But when we understand grace, which is the magic, which I want to give you all access to, I don't want you to learn anymore. You've learned enough yoga. You've got more than enough yoga. You've got so much yoga, it's coming out of your ears. That's not where you need to study. What you need to do is explore yourself. And out of that, it will reflect the experience of your clients, and I'm telling you, delicious. And I'm 64 this year, and Paul is 54 this year, I think, or 53. I can't remember. I mean, I can't keep up with him. He's jiu-jitsu every day. I mean, are you kidding me? Not an injury in sight. And I've worked with him in a local Pilates studio. I've never seen anything like it, because he knows every single repertoire of the Pilates, like inside out and backwards. And we were both in the room together, and I'm really nice to everybody. And I'm standing there looking at one of these people on a reformer, and I'm going, oh, you look absolutely beautiful, but I'm not sure that's an optimal way to move. And he looks at me, because he's from Wigan in Manchester in north of England, and he speaks fluent Wiganese. And he stands there and goes, what are you talking about? I said, sorry? He said, what are you talking about? She doesn't look beautiful at all. She's about to kill herself. And I don't work like that. I mean, I'm like, holy schmoly. I'm like, Paul, he says, oh, give me a break. Stop telling her she looks beautiful. She's going to think it's fabulous. And what she's doing is absolutely detrimental. Come on, wake up, do this. And he said, look at your neck, look at your, it's only a question of when you get a herniated disc. And he's right. He's a neuromuscular therapist. I'm a structural integrator. We know that. We're both, you know, we've had similar training. But he said to me, you could spend so long being so nice to people. They're injured before you point out that not to do that. But spiritual science has given me and Surat Shabda Yoga, which is a daily chanting meditation, listening to the sound current. And the sound current is the audible light stream. It's an audible light stream. And here's the thing that blew me away. When I discovered that fascia emits light and transmits sound and is always trying to heal you, it transformed my world, because I realized that the fascia matrix is the tissue of love, light, and sound in the body. And that's actually all we want in our lives. And we have the power to tune our bodies to that frequency, physically, emotionally, mentally, etherically, and soulically, because we are already souls animating our forms. So where I come from, and thank you, that's such a lovely comment. Where I come from is, how can we recognize the fascia as our inner tissue of love, light, and sound ministering to us 24/7? Can we honor it? Can we support it? Can we show gratitude to it? Can we give it its sense of itself? And interestingly, and this is a rumor, not fact, Bill Gates of Microsoft is working with Gerald Pollack, who did all the work on the 4th phase of water and bound water, which is what our bodies are made of, bound water. You know, when you cut a lemon in half, you may get a few drips, but it doesn't, you don't hold it upside down and all the lemon juice comes out. You have to compress it. So you have to have more compression than it can stand to get the juice out of the tensioned juice droplets. Does that make sense? So that's what happens to us when we do over compressive movements, which that plank was over compressive. When compression wins, you lose, because we have a tensional bias to spring. But having said that, if you over tension or try and over lengthen the tensional force, like doing the splits, it loses its elastic recoil. So we can't do either extreme. But when I realized that this bound water inside us, so as I was saying, Bill Gates, they've now realized that bound water holds memory better than silicon chips. And a silicon chip is artificial quartz. So quartz is a crystal, a pure crystal. Remember I said animal, vegetable, and mineral. Quartz is a pure crystal that holds memory. Water is a liquid crystal that holds memory, and you are 70–80% water. So your tissue holds memory. So the idea that the issue is in the tissue, I mean, I just laugh when I hear that, because I'm like, well, where the hell else is it going to go, for Christ's sake? You're in Earth School, so it's going to be in your tissue, right? Can you remove it? Absolutely. Can you restore the grace that you came in with? In my opinion, yes. And I'm not making any great claims. I wouldn't have liked Hitler as a client. I wouldn't want his karma. Thank you. Or Mussolini, or many people that are alive today that I'm not going to comment on because I don't want to get into trouble. But you know what I'm saying? And I just think we're more than beings in bodies with minds. We're heart-centered creatures, self-organized in a tissue that ministers love, light, and sound to us and through us all the time. And when we fall in love, it's because that's matched and met and honored when it is. I love Earth School. My mind is blown. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. You're so welcome.